let's talk about the value of education, public education versus the rest of the world in the United States. Tell me about that.
So when it comes to education, there's one of the most successful indicators in America is your zip code. So if you live in a good zip code, you're going to do far better statistically than you will if you're in a bad zip code, right?
Yeah.
And a lot has to do with just our property values and the money that gets invested into these schools. I mean, my sister just moved from Santee, Del Mar, and her kids are just getting a dramatically better education,
right?
Because there's so much more property taxes and money going into those schools. That's not to say, though, you can't go to a school in Santee or Granite, where we came from, and be successful as well. It comes down to you. I would say for the most part, there's a lot of, discredit and criticism towards American education. However, we have the best education in the world, or at least, in the top 5, let's just say. Because, I don't
know, man. I've seen some stuff.
No, I know the PISA
stuff in China seems pretty hardcore. And again, I'm not an expert in this field. You are. You're an expert in education. Yes, go ahead.
Please, can I finish?
Go ahead.
So if you're talking about other countries, so I've been around the world and I've seen it. Cultural values are very important. And having a homogenous population also really helps. So for example, places like Finland scores really well. But the reason is because there's 4 million people there. They're all Finns. They're all from the same culture. And so it's really easy to take that little group, that little sub-study, and be like, look at Finland. Whereas you got 10,000 people a day coming into America, coming from all parts of the world, and they're kind of mixed into the, the mix, I guess you can say, of
more variables.
So, we have 300 plus million people, so it's tough to say that we're not doing great. But if you look at our universities, take the top 20 universities in the world, we got like the top 50 or top 17 or something like that. And it's like, that's where real education happens, is that higher ed and innovation. We're an incubator for success. That's why everyone wants to come here. We have a line out the door coming in our country, is because we have the best opportunities. Now, statistically, there are countries scoring higher than we do, but what we also do is some of these scores are very traditional. Let's say math. You know who's really good at math?
The Japanese.
A calculator. A calculator's great. Yeah. You know what I mean? So even if you're going into China, they're getting better at it, but there's a lot of rote memorization. It's like, we're going to study for 10 hours how to do these multiplication facts, and they're working really hard. And I appreciate their work ethic, and I appreciate their value for education. They revere teachers. They respect teachers far more than they do in the West. However, we are a hotbed of innovation, and we're allowed to free think and think critically. And those higher levels of thinking in Bloom's taxonomy are happening here. They happen in Europe. They happen in lots of places. Singapore, again, a bit of an outlier, or, Japan, but Singapore is probably one of the hotbeds of education right now in the world. And what I love about what Singapore did is they were like, as a country, education is going to be number 1 for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Germany, we're going to go to Japan, we're going to go to the States, and we're going to get the best of all of them. And we're going to make it like a countrywide thing where, that's our number 1 focus, is education. And they went from being a malaria-filled, poverty-stricken island with literally no resources in like the early 60s to now the financial capital of Southeast Asia. They did it in a generation, and they did it through education. So
love that.
Education is so important, but don't think because you're in America, you don't have all the opportunities and all the privilege to be successful. Because I don't care where you are in America. Take advantage.
Love that. Yeah. We're going to dive into more about that. Yep. And we're going to talk about how we can skip these lines, guys. Let's talk about number 2. Let's talk about when a call to action is real.
Love that. So the call to action was real for me when I first came to Puerto Rico. And it was called real. The call to action for me was real when I went to get those avocados, right? And sold to get that party. But
by necessity.
Yeah. Yeah. But for me in Puerto Rico, I came there from Africa, serving at the American School of Lagos. And I knew not much about Puerto Rico. I didn't realize it was truly America. Everyone there is an American citizen. There's USPS, there's National Park Service, there's Costco. I was like, oh, these are my people. I had just, arrived there, and I was like, Puerto Rico is America. I'm American. And to me, you're American as soon as you step foot on the country. Once you're here, you're on the same team.
Yep.
Right? And so I was looking for schools to put my kids in. And I was shocked because I saw these schools were kind of similar to Africa. And I was like, how is this America? Like, how are the schools producing an education similar to some of these really low performing schools in countries? And so I started to research. I'm like, maybe I'm overthinking it. And then you look into the data, and Puerto Rico is the outlier of the outliers. They score worse than Mexico public schools. They score worse than Thailand. They're the worst of anyone who scored on the PISA test the last time they took it. And so for me, it just did not sit right. I came there to take a year off, write my book, go fishing and spearfishing, and just relax. But after seeing these American kids getting an education that was below Mexico, and I'm just cognizant of it being from San Diego, I could not sit back and enjoy my life knowing these American kids weren't getting, they didn't have a rope. And what I mean by that is I'm talking to 17-year-old kids who they're finishing up high school. They've never touched a computer before. They barely speak English. They have no direction. And they did the right thing. They tried.
Yeah.
They went to school. Their families cared about education. And they even went to private schools.
And the system was failing them.
The system is broken. And I was like, I know I can help. And I can't just sit back and do nothing. And so that's how Tech My School was born, was me really literally going to a director and being like, hey, I noticed there's no public libraries. Your school has like no books. I know kids aren't reading. Would you like 40,000 books digitally? Would you like some computers? I'll teach you how to do that. Would you like a school email for everyone? And so it started with a volunteer. And then, within the first month of putting my kids in their school, I went from new parent to training all staff. And then within the first 6 months, I went from 1 school to 4 schools. And so all of it was service-based. And so I used that boat money to serve the schools, the thought that, if I can raise money, great, I will. But even if I didn't, I was like, this is more important for me to serve these kids, even if it's for a short period of time and I don't make it. So you have to go into entrepreneurship thinking, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, I can't live my life and not do this. I can't sit there and be like, sitting in a cubicle, grinding out the hours and just be like, I think I could be really good at this one thing. I got to do it. I got to at least try. And so that's it. It's like, you got to be like, you know what? I have a good enough resume where if I fail, I fail, but I know I went out swinging, and you have to swing. And that way you don't die with regret.
Yeah, this is what I'll say about Rob. You can obviously feel his passion coming out, why he started the company. It is a nonprofit. Rob had no prior entrepreneurship experience except for just kind of his own experiences in life, which he told the avocado story. And he just kind of had to grind to make it in his own life. So he has thought outside of the box. He does do his research. He does look for hacks and ways to essentially, catapult his life forward wherever he can. But he also follows along the normal path, I would say, of, step in the educational system, which is very, very, very systematic. He did it in his own way when he was living overseas, etc. But when he got to Puerto Rico, he had built enough reserve capital. He had some cash flowing real estate. He had a property that he paid for cash, that he was basically going there to be able to relax and chill. And then this thing happened, and it was like, wham, I have to do something here. Where he came from in his life and what he knew and all the experience he had, he said, I can make a difference here. I'm going to do it. There are so many Fortune 500 companies that started exactly like this. Airbnb started exactly like this. Google started exactly like this. There are companies that you use every single day that started because people felt like they needed to do something, either to solve a problem in their life or solve a problem, a need that they saw in the community or in someone close to them. So the takeaway would be, if you feel that call to action, you can help. And that comes from a go-giver service mentality. And as a result of that, guys, oftentimes money's going to come.
Yeah.
It's going to follow. And it's risk. It's not going to be easy at the beginning. We're going to talk about your entrepreneurship journey, what you've grown tonight on the panel that you're sitting on, along with Anthony Ramirez and Tom Kadar, about more into the nonprofit sector. We'll have some of that. We'll post some of that. But we got to keep moving.